Um, Again, it's it might be almost a question, in fact, but it's linking to what you picked up on a little bit as well, Simon, which is that.
Would you say who you are, please?
Sailesh Kataria, Independent. What Juan Pablo and Pedro mentioned. Sailesh Kataria, Independent. What Juan Pablo and Pedro mentioned about Systema B. Can I ask what is either preventing you from attracting people like Jonathan to joining or following through with your approach, Corporation B type of approaches? And secondly, from your perspective, Jonathan, on the one hand, I think you almost undersold the pro-poor or development benefits or related benefits to what you're doing, almost to the extent of almost making it sound negative when you said, no, government should just stay out of everything and things like that. But at the same time, if there were regulatory issues which are included, linked to Corporation B type of things for your company, how much would that hamper the work you do? And lastly, what would CDKN do to try and promote this type of approach being followed by Jonathan type of groups?
Okay, we're going to take a few and come back to these questions. Who else would like to come in, please? One there, and then you. The lady in the front first, and then the. No.
I'm Olivia Buchner from the London School of Economics. I used to do research on microhydros.
Speak into the microphone.
On microhydros in Nepal, and I relate to many issues, and I'm really fascinated by the agent-tenant, not anchor-tenant idea. I wanted to just know your view on three main problems that we saw. One was the maintenance of systems. I mean, the project that I was looking at was ODA, classical. Maintenance of systems afterwards, how do you do that in these very remote areas? We found that community organization was the key, that the community in itself had this interest and was organized also. And the third one was this question of dependency. Like when you were talking about we created drip irrigation, how does that work? Because we also found that when communities were introducing agri-processing themselves, then it was very successful. But in other cases, it just kind of broke at some point. So where did you get the inspiration for this kind of approach, and what do you do in a situation where there's a lack of enforcement and legal infrastructure that you're all talking about, which was the case for Nepal in these very remote areas where you can't really get this recourse? Thank you.
Would it have helped you in Nepal if you had had B Corp type principles embedded in the projects, and with legislation and with, quote, fiduciary responsibility?
It's kind of hard to imagine because there isn't this possibility of enforcing anything. So you could, of course, have it in your bylaws and all of that, but would it really, like the projects, how they worked was normally you go to a new community, you build a new installation, and then you leave and you never come back because it's more profitable or makes more sense to build new ones instead of maintaining old ones. So I think in a kind of more integrated system, I think it would definitely make sense. But considering the remoteness of these areas, I think it's very hard to tell. Yeah.
That's interesting. Okay, you're not all doing very well at saying something rather than asking questions, but let's keep going with a few more. You there, and then two more, and then we'll see where we get to.
Hello, my name is Jeremy. I've just started a B Corp, and so to continue the discussion about the fiduciary responsibility that we have, my understanding of it is the fact that the B Corp system holds you accountable. So to have this status of being a B Corp company, you have to make sure that you are protecting your stakeholders as well as your shareholders within the industry. And so in terms of being a remote project or initiative, I can understand why that wouldn't necessarily have such an impact. But on a kind of more, in the current system as it stands, it's the difference between a business as an LLC or a public traded company where you don't have that accountability. And so this is the new sort of process from not having to ever have included it to one that then suddenly does have to.
And what does your B Corp do? What's it called? Let's have some free publicity while we're at it.
It's called a new group, and we are setting up a platform called a new mission where people from all over the world can come and contribute and collaborate together on ideas that are on world benefit problems.
Fine, very good. The chap in the check shirt behind you, and then we'll come to you, Simon, in the front.
Hi, Will McFarland. I'm a researcher in the Green Growth team here at ODI. Try and not ask a question, but I've got a bit of an existential problem, I think, around how kind of Jonathan described his business and relating to Pippa's introduction and linking this back to international aid and efforts in this space. If we're saying that the incremental cost of doing business in a more socially and climate compatible way is unlikely to be met by the population of investors that we currently have, and we therefore need assistance from foundations or domestic governments or international donors in order to achieve that, are we not then simply attributing the climate compatible part of what the business is now doing to the risk that was taken away and paid for publicly? And I think how we kind of view where the cost lies, what is needed to get over the hurdle of having a business act in a more sustainable way. There's obviously kind of a middle ground where the donor is happy and the business is happy to kind of be pushed in a new direction. I think kind of, you know, we constantly need to kind of think where that is, and is the public sector getting its returns back? Is the private sector making too much returns? I'm just kind of interested, like, where this dynamic is that allows companies to make the quantitative leap, but maybe expects the risk to be borne entirely by someone else.
Whereas your view, just to be clear, is that they should be doing this without a public subsidy,
Or could they be doing it without one? And
even without a carbon price, for example.
yeah, especially maybe the carbon is a kind of nice monetary one, but some of the more social, community-based benefits, you know, there's no one's talking about a price for those.
Yeah. I think we'll come back to that. I've got one in the front here, and then I'm just going to pause a minute and I'll come to three of you who have your hands up after that. Simon.
Thank you. Simon Lister, multi-hatted, but Director of Northumbrian Water, one of the big water companies in the UK, speaking with that hat on. I think this whole idea of this beaker is very exciting, and you know, I think that if you can get a critical mass going of companies that are doing it, then the pressure for more businesses to do it will grow as well. Issue though, I think if you ask Northumbrian Water, they would say they aspire to all the values that are there in the B Corp. Others might disagree with them. That's what they would say. But I think there is an issue over this, as you mentioned, Simon, this legal question. Actually, you know, getting your legal articles of association changed so that you've got the triple bottom line there you're legally committed to. And I think that is an issue for company law, and I think that this is an area that we're going to need to look at to make you know, if we want this mass transformation going, because I think it's these legal questions as much as the substantive values questions that would need to be addressed. But I think it's well worth doing, and I think there's every chance that this kind of movement could become very big indeed.
Are you certified by anybody in Northumbrian Water?
Well, we operate under UK company law. We were a PLC. We're actually privately owned now. But I suspect, I mean, I don't know this, but I suspect there would be legal issues for, you know, a FTSE 100 company, for example, to change its laws so that instead of being there for the benefit of the shareholders, you're there for the benefit of these other stakeholders. And I just think that's an issue that we need to address and get right if this thing is going to become really big time, which it could do.
Okay, let's just get some quick responses, but quick, because I want to make sure we have lots more time for discussion and there are three people queuing. Do you want to go first on this question? These questions about the comparison with Nepal?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly our whole model in the village power and everything else is based around community involvement. So we're not going to put stuff in there and just walk away. I mean, you know, and we're working now whether we have, you know, the local commissioner who happens to live in the village, well, he will be the sort of head guy responsible for this, you know, for the irrigation project or for the solar in the houses. You basically need their involvement. Hopefully with the solar there is very little maintenance. Hopefully we will train up a couple of local people in order to maintain this, and hopefully they will become as necessary in their life so they would actually respond to fixing it. Now, the government puts in boreholes. the borehole pump gets broken, but there's no money to repair it. So even though there's a borehole, they won't produce any water for 3 months because they don't have a $3 part, or the guy who's supposed to get paid doesn't get paid to fix it. So, we need to overcome that, and we need to make sure they take some responsibility for sorting it out. And quite frankly, if they don't sort it out, we'll just take it out again and put it somewhere else. So, I think it'll be a bit of a carrot and stick, but we've really got to engage with the local people. I forget what's your last question. What was your last point about?
How you do this when you don't have this kind of legal infrastructure?
I think you're never going to be able to sue anybody or do anything, so it depends on personal relationships with the people. This then becomes something that this village has got and other villages don't. They're proud of it. You have local people that are getting electricity. If somebody goes and steals solar panels, I expect them to find the guy, get the panel back and sort it out. I'm not going to be chasing them. It's their responsibility. It's in their village. It's providing them with power. They need to take responsibility for it. And if they're not prepared to do that, then it's the wrong village or the wrong model.
So it's not on your profit and loss account, so to speak.
Well,
maintenance. That's what I want.
No, the maintenance. We will pay for the maintenance, and we'll pay somebody to do the maintenance. But it's going to be them that we're paying to do the maintenance, not us. That's going to fly. Go out. We'll visit every 3 months or whatever it is. But we don't expect to be on a 24-hour phone call to fly out to some village to fix a pump.
Will's question, I think you might want to say something about, which is also this question of what's the need for public subsidy. And somebody's come in online, Catherine Allison from Future Earth, which says, excellent point being made by Will. I thought I would read that out, Will. Will legislation be required to motivate private sector to invest in the triple bottom line? Or not?
Well, first of all, I don't think legislation. I think if people see an economic benefit in doing something, they're going to do it. So I think that's the condition you need to create. I think in the case of this particular project, this it's risky. We are in an investigative phase, and to see which model works. Even if one of these models, or when one or more of these models is proved to work, there's a huge amount of work and effort required to go out and prepare legal documentations, go on road shows, attract investors, do all of this. So, this is just a tiny drop in the ocean, but it was necessary to prove whether it works or not and to work through a particular model. That's not generally the role of business. They're not looking for new models. Apple comes up with a new product. It's got a customer base. It's done some market testing. It goes out and does that. I don't know if there is a business yet in supplying electricity to small villages in Africa where they pay. You had some experiences in Nepal. They probably weren't great. Would you roll that out across the country? Probably not. But we're looking to see if we can make it work and then roll it out across the country. And if we can make it work and show it works, that'll attract tons of private money.
Actually, there's quite a lot of experience in Southern Africa and in East Africa, in Kenya, for example, with solar energy. And there's a very big literature on the question of how government supports innovation. And Mariana Mazzucato's book, The Entrepreneurial State, 90% of the innovations in an Apple iPhone were state-funded.
Yes, that's the issue I would like to. I think what isn't state subsidised in those first early years?
But
the carbon issue problem through fossil fuels has come through subsidies as well.
But where do you deploy your government incentives? Is actually the critical question. I want to then we'll come to you in a second, Pippa, but to come first to Pedro, and between you and Juan Pablo, these two key issues about the fiduciary liability, the legal point that was being made, how the certification works, the legislation, and then the community. So those things have been asked about. Do you want to comment on some of those?
Sure. Well, I'll speak about the fiduciary liability. The amendment to your bylaws, that's done on a voluntary basis. So it's only when the shareholders agree on that that happens. It doesn't come from the government. So it means that you want to be business with the new genetics, right? And that enables to grant a legal clarity of this combination of a new legal clause with a new way of being business, where profit is balanced with the other creation of values at the same time. So you can incorporate the long-term variables and not only the short-term variables, so often expressed in profit. So the expansion of the legal fiduciary clause in each B Corp under a legislative scheme where you don't have this legal clause established by the public law, you can do it right away today through a private contract. That's what we're talking about. That's private. So,
of course, lots of companies already report in that way. But the question, I suppose, that's going to arise is: are there trade-offs? Do you have, in all these cases that you showed us, are there any places where companies are saying, actually, you know what, we're not making much money, but we're doing something really good for the environment?
well,
Or is it everything win-win-win?
well, let's face it. I mean, it all depends your time frame. I mean, Guayaquil, in our case, we invest in our suppliers, in their land tenure. We invest in their legal titles, right? We invest in education of the communities. We invest in technology transfer on how to accelerate pollination and how to actually regenerate so they can do it in their own lands. Now, this is not charity. This is not helping anybody. This is investing in our own business, because if they cannot assure us the supply, the entire business is in risk. So we need to do that as an inherent part of business. Now, you would say, how can you make it, given that you're paying from 4 to 6 times more? Does that mean more? Your products are more expensive? Well, yes. In the mate product, when it's only the leaf loose mate, it's fair trade product. But the other products, we compete with the same type of prices with the other brands in the market. Why? Because we invested in research and development and how to do that. You see? So that's where innovation comes in. But you incorporate the triple value creation into your mindset, into all of the departments of your company, and all those externalities, you incorporate them into your pricing system. So and you think in a longer term, time frame. And I just love to go back. We want all the Jonathans of the world in this movement. That's true. But the only way of doing that is sharing the example, showing our cases, and just showing the achievements. And it's, be the change you want to see. Gandhi, that's one. I have a dream of changing the world. You combine this in your own corporate DNA.
Okay.
And who doesn't want to live life that way? You see? So once, the first thing that I asked him was, hey, why don't you join us? Are there any B Corps in Africa? You see, so this is what we do. We share the way we do business. And
good, thank you. Certification and so on, anything to say about that?
Okay, yes, and I'm going to look at Jonathan because we want his company to be the first big corp in Uganda. So if Jonathan gets it, then that's allowed for more companies to be certified.
I've got his business card here. Shall I pass it on?
I've got the bylaw.
Okay, so some interesting features of the certification. The first step to certify as a B Corp is to fill a tool that is called the B Impact Assessment. It is a public tool. I mean, it's a public good. Anyone can use it for free. There are more than 25,000 businesses using the B Impact Assessment to measure their social and environmental outcomes. So that tool adapts to size, industry, and territory. So there are more than 60 combinations of the B Impact Assessment. So businesses, service businesses to retail businesses to manufacturing businesses to different types of evaluation. When you finish the evaluation, you have a review that the idea of that review is to make sure that as a company you feel correctly assessment. And after you have that review with someone from the standards team, you have to proof with documents that what you put on that assessment is correct, right? So those are the 3 steps in order to make sure that the information filled in the B Impact Assessment is correct. After that, and that's the longest step, you start iterating the documents with the people from standards, from BLAB. And when the documents are correct, 10% of the companies that certify at B Corps randomly are chosen to have an on-site review, kind of an auditing on-site to see if the company is doing the practices that they're supposed to be doing, and so on. And then B Corps, when they get certified, as Pedro said before, they've signed this declaration of interdependence that mainly commits them to recertify every 2 years, to be part of a global community, and to make the change of the bylaws within a 1 year period. Okay, so they have, within 1 year period, they have to make this change of the bylaws. There's another things important about this certification. You have the standard, so you have to get some points to be a certified B Corp. Around 90% of businesses that formally declare that they want to become a B Corp do not get the minimum standards. You have the legal change, the bylaws change, and in addition you have a complaint process where any citizen in the world could elevate some complaints about the B Corp, and if that person or if that organization has proof that the business is not doing what they said they were doing, that's a reason to leave the community.
How many have been decertified so far?
So, in the last 8 years, 10 have been decertified because of that, and 8% of the certified B Corps, when they cannot recertify. And they do not recertify mainly because they stop existing as businesses. Okay? And about the community, the important thing is that, because, do you want me to answer
hold that,
later?
because I'm a bit
Okay.
anxious about the people who haven't yet come in. Pippa, do you want to say something quickly just before we move on? And we'll keep the community, remind me.
Okay.
Do you want to come back? I think the question in terms of what's CDKN doing about this, and I think also the question about how we're using, the issue around subsidies with, international aid funding. And I think CDKN works in that triple win space. So how do you work on things which are actually addressing mitigation, adaptation, and development imperatives? And one thing we found, is the issue of urgency around the climate issue. It's about acting now, and it's about critical mass of action now. So we are looking at accelerating. How do we do these accelerating? There's a whole initiative called the Energy Accelerator. It's about how do we move these things along, and we see that as part of our role. But what we see is that coming up to Paris, the INDCs, and this is now talking our work, this sort of world around the pledges, will probably be not ambitious enough. So we are interested in how do we bring that critical mass of action to Paris as well, from Lima to Paris, and we're interested in that. So the role we play, I think, is around knowledge sharing, around best practice that can inspire others and that can motivate this critical mass of action. Slightly perhaps contentious with Jonathan, I would say we're very interested in what governments think about what's going to happen in Uganda, because they're actually dealing with their developmental goals, sustainable development goals, development priorities around energy access, and will be around their emissions as well. So whether that's interventionist or not, we are interested in the fact that this will enable them to meet those, and their communities to meet those goals. They will have to report on those. No matter what your company reports, in the end, it's about this double counting of emissions reduction. The country would need to be able to report on those. So we're interested about that. And in the end, what CDKN's doing with this piece is trying to get evidence of where things work, some best practice that can inspire, but also evidence of how do you best use ODA, so international cooperation aid. Where's the best way to provide these subsidies? Is it a subsidy in the geothermal market in Kenya, which actually addresses the decade-old issue of risk and risk insurance by bringing innovative financial mechanisms around risk insurance? We play a brokering role. Can you bring in people in the risk insurance to think about how you can get over that? Once that happens, it should be just private sector doing it anyway, because the policies are in place and private sector will go in. We hope that if you actually prove this works, we would not need to subsidise anybody else to go into that market, because the market would work. I think that's our role within that one.
Thank you very much. We've got about 10 minutes. Sheila, you were there, and there were two other people with their hands up. You and there was somebody over there, 3. I think that'll be it.
Thank you, Sheila Page. I wanted, none of you has really answered Simon's question about how you resolve not so much conflicts among the objectives in terms of meeting minimum requirements, but I can see how you could write into your own laws or the country's laws for a big company, you must have a minimum return of this, you must do a minimum of that for the environment, for your workers, for your community. But assuming you have some surplus, or in the alternative case, assuming you cannot meet all of those, who decides which of these gives and by how much? You can have a supervisory board to do this sort of thing, as the German companies do. You can have a founding father of the company to do it, which I suspect is probably the answer for a lot of the companies at the moment. But if you have to do something which is going to protect, to help your workers, but might not be the best thing for the community, not actually damaging to the community, but you have to decide which one. Who has the final decision in saying which is the objective? Because I do not see how you can have 4 objectives without having someone with the responsibility for saying this is it. And really linked to that, I was interested that Juan Pablo said that one of the reasons, the main reasons people left his certification was because they went out of business. If a company is faced with the possibility of going out of business because it cannot meet one of the, or possibly more of the criteria, are there provisions for it to have a free couple of years or something like that? Because again, you don't really want to drive a company permanently out of business or even out of certification if it's doing its best.
Okay, thank you. Chap behind you.
Ian Milborough, PwC. I was interested in the evolution of the B Corp movement, and I guess to my mind I was thinking what would make that a compelling decision for a board? And to my mind, one of the reasons might be the ability to raise capital more cheaply than their peers. So for that to happen, there needs to be an understanding of the benefits of the B Corp initiative from institutional investors and similar. So I'd be interested in reaction on that.
Do you think it's likely that there would be cheaper capital available if you were a B Corp? Is that
exactly correct?
Okay. And you over there, sorry, yes.
Great, thanks. So my name is James Van Alstyne with the Sustainability Research Institute at the University of Leeds. I just wanted to make a couple points, and one is my research is in Uganda, and I would have to agree with Pippa that the government would be very, very interested and would need to be involved in these types of initiatives, particularly at the local level. And I understand that Jonathan mentioned about local partnership, and I think that's absolutely crucial, particularly for the sustainability of any private sector enterprise at the local level. It would need to be incorporated into district development plans in order for actually there to be long-term maintenance of these types of infrastructure. And that would then be wrapped up into national level planning processes. The other point I wanted to make was really about sort of many of the projects that were discussed here are entrepreneurial, but there's the large corporations that are doing corporate social responsibility around the world. And that's where we've taken a look at, as part of a CDCAM project that was at Leeds actually, mining houses in Zambia that are doing CSR and how those could potentially be integrated with their CCD objectives, essentially. And so some interesting findings there. But what I was thinking is that really there was a governance gap that we identified in that the B Corp could potentially be something along the lines of a, sorry about that, need to catch my breath. That B Corp could actually be that space within that governance space to fill that gap. So to create linkages between the local and international level to create standards around this space, around CSR and CCD.
Just to explain that a bit more, you've got large mining companies, global mining companies working in Zambia who have an interest in CSR and maybe in triple bottom line, but it's the but I didn't quite understand. What's the governance gap?
Yeah, exactly. So what we found was that they were doing very, very interesting projects. So around agriculture, irrigation, farming with women, etc. But they weren't necessarily being badged as CCD. But they weren't even linked with the joint forest management programs within Zambia or the RED programs within Zambia. But those all are related to what the corporations were doing. In fact, they had very much impacts on forest. Deforestation and afforestation, etc. And so to try to create those linkages with what those large companies are doing with what the actual government plans are and processes are would be a very interesting space for a standards-based organization.
Okay, very good. Let's go along the panel, starting with Pippa. And look, here's the problem I'd like you to address, and it reflects the comments we just had. I'm the CEO of a really large, really hard-headed business globally. And I do care about the triple bottom line, and I'm doing it, and I report on it, and I'm certified by IRIS or by GERS or by the investment things. I might even be doing some fair trade and some Rainforest Alliance work, possibly. Just now, sell me this new way of approach and how I'm going to deal with these governance issues and the trade-offs and why there are really practical benefits for me. That's what I want to hear as we close the meeting. Pippa, do you want to start and we'll go along? Or should we come back to you?
Yes, come back to me. You're asking on the System B one. I think here the others
Okay,
first
Juan
answer.
Pablo.
Good question. And these become personal opinions, and many people ask, why should I be a B Corp? And I believe you have two ways of answering it. One is about convictions, because being a B Corp, it's a clear frame that goes from standards to governance and to having a formal commitment and a legally binding commitment to improve as a business, and to be part of a community where the interdependence principle is quite important. To be part of the evolution of capitalism, and mainly B Corps are not trying to take away from the market other initiatives that are quite complementary for B Corps, like conscious capitalism, the CSR movement, the economy of well-being, and so on. But so mainly, the main reason in terms of convictions is that you have protection in order to maximize purpose and not only profit. So that would be one answer. Second answer, in terms of benefits, we all know that as B Corps are being developed and the sustainable business movement has been growing, you also have a growth on impact investment. So for impact investors to have more B Corps on market, it's really good news, because B Corps have metrics. So being a B Corp is a first step to be a little bit more investment ready. And mainly, investors complain that they don't have a good pipeline of investment ready business, and entrepreneurs complain that there's not enough investment, right? And that happens a lot in Latin America. So when B Corps commit to some metrics and to be legally binded by this change of bylaws, it's a first step to be closer to investors.
Okay.
I have more arguments, but
That's good. Well, we're now slightly over time, so briefly, the remaining speakers.
For me, I think I would pick up on that argument. If there is actually ability to access cheaper capital, I think that would be a very strong argument, and also to say that you can access a whole group of investors who would now be looking at me because I am a B Corp. I think that would be the reason if I was really that hard-headed CEO that you mentioned.
What about the network externalities point, which is that you're part of this community?
Well, I was actually going to say that if you could build on that community, that it wasn't just, well, I'm dealing with other like-minded people, but there are things like improved payment terms between people that are all B Corps and they get 120 days instead of 60 days to pay, or there's some other economic drivers that would everybody's helping each other, or maybe there's a pool of loan capital that comes in together that can be used to help people that get in trouble, or something that makes it that you're all part of the community and you can draw on. I think that would be a great sort of shared resource and another way to do it. Or even banks that were getting involved with special lending windows to B Corps or something like that.
A 10% discount.
Something like that. Yes.
Somebody from PwC asked Anisha, how can we engage the traditional purely for-profit business? And that is the kind of answer.
Yeah, I think that would be the way.
Yes, and now?
I would just use the human dynamics. I would ask the hard-headed CEOs what they think and why they want to go on this line. So, for example, you have the Natura case, the largest B Corp in the world, publicly listed, that actually created a contagious effect on Paul Polman from Unilever, who announced that he wanted to start the process with the B impact assessment and announced it at the Davos Economic Forum. So there you see the effect of being pioneers and trying to be leading the world in that direction. And the main reason for which Natura became a B Corp is because they want to belong to this community and they want to develop a community that leads the way to the evolution of the economy and the evolution of the markets. So I think it's crucial to incorporate the human dimension in all this.
Okay.
Simon, I would like
Yes.
to say, I would say, and then open up. I think the new possibility of new markets within the climate compatible development space is massive. And I think it's an area where you're linking, you get a lot of social enterprise, you get a lot of environmental enterprise, but linking the two and putting that within where you meet both climate and development imperatives, I think is the new market area. And that's what I would say to the CEO. And by being part of the community, you're getting a sight into where those opportunities could be.
Very good. You know, there are, I mean, if you think about this in economics or environmentals, there are labelling benefits. You know, there's a certification benefit. There are clearly market development options associated with this in the same way that the fair trade label on your Kit Kat is some kind of, it's a market tool for the people who own Kit Kat. There might well be upstream benefits in terms of your, you know, the 10% discount, the 60-day credit, unlimited credit, or the cheaper capital. There are issues which the certification schemes in the UK worry a lot about around stability, resilience of the supply chain, which could also be part of this. And then there are these other wider social benefits. So I think we've given it a good test. I wanted not to just kind of give it a big tick without having a good discussion. We've given it a really good test. We've had a very useful discussion. I'd like to thank everybody outside the room. I'd like to thank those of you in the room. And please join me in giving the panel a round of applause. Thank you very much.